Hello, my name is Ralph Lear. A lot of people ask me why I call myself a fine art photographer. Well, basically it's because I take the image out of the camera and I turn it into an image that reflects the emotions that I felt when I took this image, or what I saw when I took this image. If you compare the images here before on the screen, the left image is the image as the camera saw it. The camera sensor is unfortunately not quite as sophisticated as our human brain, and it only records the light, and it records the light based on the exposure settings that I make, for instance. If you look at the picture on the left, you see the sky is way overexposed, and the shadows on the bank of the river are way underexposed, and the details are lost. The correct exposure is probably on the buildings, but that's not the way I saw this picture. I saw the wonderful colors of the autumn leaves on the trees of the island, the blue sky, because it was a really nice day, the reflections in the buildings, and all that the camera wasn't able to capture it. A normal photographer, he captures that moment, and that moment is the camera saw. A fine art photographer takes that one step further, and he turns this raw picture into a creative, unique image for me as I saw it at that time. And if you compare it to the picture on the right, that's the finished picture, you'll see there's quite a difference in the way the camera saw that picture and the way I portrayed that picture. So now I'd like to take you through the steps I use when developing the file. I use Lightroom CC at the moment. Yeah, like I said, I'll take you through the steps, and if you're interested in turning your photos into fine art photos, I think this will be a good basis to get you started. So let me go to the original file now. Let me get it. There's the original file. And the first thing I like to do is create a virtual copy of the file and work only with the virtual copy. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to straighten up my buildings here. I can do that with the transform, and I'll use the automatic button, auto transform, and let Lightroom figure it out. Lightroom did a pretty good job. The building here is vertical, the bridge is horizontal, everything looks just fine. I'll leave it like that. Then I want to add some lens correction. I want to remove any chromatic aberration that might occur while I'm developing this picture. And I want to enable profile correction because this picture was shot at 31 millimeters. There's a little distortion still in it, and there's a profile in Lightroom that'll correct that. So that's looking pretty good. The next step, I'll go into the basic module. In the basic module, that's the place where I always start my development. There I can set the temperature of setting the colors. I can work with the tone, and I can work with the presence. With the temperature, I have different choices here. I can use a preset white balance. For instance, if I choose daylight, not quite much difference because my camera was set at auto, and the auto recognized the daylight situation. You can see if I go to cloudy, there's a little bit of a change. Makes the picture a little warmer, but makes the sky a little paler. Something like tungsten is completely wrong because obviously it wasn't taken under tungsten light. But what I prefer, you can also change the temperature manually, change the tint manually, and try to get that what you're looking for, or you can use the white balance selector. I prefer to use the white balance selector. To use the white balance selector, I look for a portion of my picture that should be neutral gray, like this part of the building right here, and the RGB values at the bottom of the grid that's shown should be approximately equal. If they're not equal, then there's too much color in that pixel that I'm selecting. That looks pretty, whoops. Let me try that one more time. That looks pretty good there. And as you see, that brought in color in the trees, brought in a little blue from the sky. I think I'll leave it right there. That's looking pretty good. If we look at the histogram, we see we have a large highlighted area and a large shadow area, but we don't have many midtones. I'm going to try through the development process to bring back some of the midtones here. The first thing I'll do is I'll go down into the tone section, and I'll move my highlights all the way down, and I'll move my shadows all the way up. Let me move my shadows back, for instance. For instance, watch what happens when I move my shadows all the way up to regain my details that were lost in the shadows here in this area of the bank, on the left-hand side of the photo there. I'll move that all the way up, and as I move it up, you see all of those details coming back out. We regained a lot of details that were in the original photo weren't visible. I'll do the same thing with my whites and my blacks. When I move my whites to the right, it'll move this portion of the data in my picture more to the right side. I just have to be careful, though, that I don't get any white clipping in that area. Now you see here the arrows is illuminated now. If I move the cursor over, I'll see the areas in my photo that were marked in red, overlaid with red, that are clipped where all detail is lost. I don't want to lose any detail in that portion of the picture, so I'll back that off just a little until the arrow disappears. There. The arrow's disappeared. We don't have any clipping anymore. I'll do the same thing with the blacks. I'll move the blacks to the left, bringing in more shadows, but I want to avoid clipping. I've got some clipping now already. If I move the cursor over the clipping arrow, we can see the clipped portions are marked in a blue overlay now. I'm going to win some of those clippings, those portions back with the brush tool a little later, so I'm going to go a little bit further, and I'll leave it right about there. Remember, all of the sliders that I'm working with right now, they affect the entire photo. If I only want to affect a part of the photo, then I'll use another tool like the graduated filter, the radial filter, or the adjustment brush. Let's go down to the clarity now. With clarity, I have to be a little careful. I don't want to increase the clarity everywhere, but I want to add a little bit of clarity. I think I'll go up to about plus 27. That added clarity a little bit in the leaves, in the buildings, and in the sky, the water. Because the picture was taken in bright daylight, we also have a little bit of haze that was caused. That happens quite often. It can also happen on a rainy day, a foggy day, glare through if I shot the picture through a window. So I want to dehaze this picture just a little bit to get a little more details back in the buildings. Now as I move it, you can see quite a bit is happening there. I'm going to leave it there at about plus 38. vibrance. Vibrance adds color to the midtones. It usually tries to protect any brown tones or tan tones, and it doesn't add any color or any saturation to the pixels that are already completely saturated. So we'll go ahead and see what the vibrance does for us. It brought back quite a bit of that blue sky. It's looking a little bit unnatural now, so I'm going to bring it back just a little. I think that's pretty good. The blue sky made quite a difference. It brought back a little in the leaves. The saturation slider, on the other hand, it affects the entire photo and all of the pixels in that photo. So let's see what happens. Going to the right all the way is just way too much. Going to the left turns it into a black and white picture. I kind of like that, which is bringing the saturation down just a little by -15 now. That means I desaturated all of the pixels in my photo. Oh, in case you didn't notice, when I added the dehaze photo here, let me notice the dehaze photo. Just a second, I'll set it back to 0. Notice this portion here of my photo, this portion here of my histogram. When I move the dehaze filter up a little bit, it tends to darken my photo and causes more shadows here. So I'm going to have to work with that a little bit, correct that effect. One thing I could do is I could lighten the entire photo, but that's not exactly what I want to do. Let me set that back. What I'll do is I'll lighten this area again, and I still want to darken the sky a little bit. So we're done now with the basic section. Let's go up to the graduated filter now. And I'll just pull a graduated filter over the sky. And I want to darken that a little bit. Now notice when I darken that, it also darkened my buildings, darkened my trees. I don't want that effect. I want to erase the filter from the areas that I don't want affected. And to do that is pretty easy. I first of all show the overlay by pressing the O key on the keyboard. Everything in red now is affected by the filter. I want to erase all of the bottom portion and all of the trees. I do that by clicking on the brush option in the graduated filter, and then on erase. And at first I'm going to remove the auto mask and get a fairly large brush and just move that across. Oops, that was too much. Let me go back. Move that across all portions of the picture that I don't want affected by the filter. I just have to be careful not to get too close to the edge, because then I'll erase part of the sky, and I don't want to do that. So now I'll turn the mask back on and make a fairly large filter, and I'll pick a color that I want everything within my brush that has this color to be unmasked. So if you see, I'm doing that now, and I'm not affecting any of the blue sky. Just being careful though to make sure I stay on a color that I want to be cleared. Still looking pretty good. Now for this area here, the color difference between the sky and the sides of the building, or here the building and the sky, is pretty much the same. And I think if I click on that, yeah, you see, you noticed it went over and erased this part of the graduated filter over the sky, and I don't want that. So let me go back, make my magnify my photo by pressing the space bar and holding the left mouse key down. I can pull it down, and let me remove the auto mask again, and I can erase those portions manually that I want erased. Oops, that wasn't good. So here's a little bit here. And we got this building. It's a little more time consuming now, but we've really got to be careful not to erase too much. A little bit of patience is required here. Just about got it. So that looks pretty good. I can remove my mask now with the O key again. And there you can see what we've got out in the sky. Now I want to move the sharpness down a little bit because I don't want the sky to be too detailed. I'll go down with the clarity just a little bit. And I'll reduce the noise a little bit in the sky. So that's looking pretty good. The next thing I want to do is I want to remove unwanted objects. For instance, these condensation trails here. I saw when the picture was magnified that there are also some birds in the picture that need to be removed. There's a sensor spot right there that needs to be removed, and we can do that all with the spot removal tool. The spot removal tool, I almost always use the hill function. The hill function is better than the clone because it blends in the pixels that are around the part that I'm changing or that I'm cropping out of the picture. So we just move the cursor over those by holding the left mouse key down. And they're gone. That looks fine. That's gone. Oops, there's a little bit there that's got to be gone. We got that sensor spot there. We've got a little something down here, I see. that's gone. Magnify the picture again by pressing the space bar. And where did those birds go? Whoops. There are those birds. Get rid of both of those. It's best to look in the light edges if there's any more. Whoops, that I didn't want to do. Remove that. There we've got a spot. Needs to be removed. Probably a bird or an airplane. There's a spot. Here's some more birds. I'm not going to get those. There's a bird here I want to remove. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. So the next thing I want to do is I want to use the adjustment brush, and I want to lighten up these areas again that got dark through the various sliders that we used. So I'll click on my effect twice to reset all of the sliders to the 0 position. I want to lighten up the effect a little bit, so I'll move that up just a little, increase the size of my brush. Ensure that the auto mask is on, yeah, and click in those areas that I want to lighten up a little bit. So you see those coming back now. So I want to lighten those up just a little more. You can also bring the shadows up. Oops, that was too much. Take that back. I want to do a new brush now because I want a little bit lighter in a few areas here. For instance, there I want some more. Yeah. Back some of these details that were lost here. Much better. So now I want another new brush. I want to lighten it up not quite as much, and I want to bring some clarity back into the buildings here because I want these buildings to really stand out. So look what's happening here. And once again, another new brush, and I'll take a little bit of clarity out of the trees here again because I don't want the user's view to stay hanging there. Whoops. Don't want to add any exposure, just a little bit of clarity. So the next thing I'll do is I'll go down to details, I'll add some sharpening to the photo because I like crisp photos, but I still want them to look natural. Now what I want to do is I want to apply this sharpening here that I just added to the edges of the buildings and try to restrict it to the edge of the building. So I use the masking slider with Alt held down, and I pull my slider to the right to where the masking is almost only on the edges of the building and on the leaves. And that worked out pretty good. And I'll add a little bit of luminous to the entire the entire photo. And for the last, we'll add a little bit of a vignette, a dark vignette, by pulling the shadows down to about -14, -15. And there we have our photo. I'm pretty satisfied with the way it looks. Oops, we've got a little bit, if I look at the histogram, we've got a little bit too dark. Let me go back up into the basic and let me pull the exposure a couple stops up. Yeah, that's much better. Now you see in the histogram, we've got a nice arc in our histogram. That means we've got some shadows, we've got some highlights. We have a lot of midtones, and the midtones have a lot of colors, a lot of blue, a lot of yellows. I'm really satisfied with that effect. Now if I want to bring out a few more of the colors here, I can go down to my HSL color. I'll take the saturation and we'll move the saturation on the orange up a little bit. Move the saturation on the reds up a little bit. And a little bit the yellows. I think that looks really nice. Add some green in there. Yeah, I'm actually quite satisfied with that photo, and if you compare it to the original, you can see there's actually no comparison. So I'm not calling myself a photographer, because that's the photo here on the left side that a photographer would make. But I used that as the basis for my artwork. And my artwork is that photograph, and it's still a photograph that you see on the right side. I hope this video helps you to realize what fine art photography is, and at least what I consider fine art photography to be. And I hope that if you want to pursue this type of photography yourself, that you can use the steps I showed you here. Thanks for watching. Bye.